The Legend of Korra, Patterns in Time. It starts by showing Katara teach Korra waterbending. Korra snowbends her to show off her strength again. She's lucky her parents are still a part of her life because Aang doesn't get that. Korra's mom apologizes to Katara and tries to help her up. And Katara says she's fought more dangerous waterbenders and still thinks Korra doesn't know how to control her power, when she clearly does know how, if she did this in the first lesson. Korra's father puts his hand on her shoulder while saying she was being too rough. He's not drawn exactly like he should be, even considering that he's younger. There's a storm that cuts their training short, so Katara leaves because she doesn't live with them, and Korra wants to play with the polar bears. She even approaches one on her own. To be fair, she's got bending, but she could still get bitten by one by surprise and be too hurt to protect herself or escape. She offers it food and moves around it, and then doesn't know which way is home anymore because the blizzard got rid of her tracks. She pets the animal that's conveniently already tamed, but is an alien compared to our animals. She snowbends to make an igloo, screams at seeing a little fireball, and conveniently the bear dog doesn't bite her. She says she's not a good firebender yet, although even at this skill level she should still be able to aim fire at the ground to make a bonfire at least. She hates all of the rules she has to deal with. Eventually her parents find her, and asks to adopt an animal that she just assumes lost its pack for no reason. Neither parent trusts the animal, realistically. Katara says every avatar had an animal guide in the past. What are the chances of that? She says the pet's just what an energetic girl needs, and there's a page full of Korra growing up with it. The story went exactly like you'd expect it did if you try to predict how the plot was gonna be. I move on to Skyscrapers, where young Asami gets told by her mother about what blueprints are and how benders make skyscrapers. It's more like an education story than a plot. This would be more interesting if we saw what she was talking about, while her dialogue was in a narration text box. She makes paper triangles as her mother keeps humoring her by telling her all of this. She's a great parent. She asks if she could help build a school, and gets told she could design an art floor for the students to use to draw blueprints. She's hugged, and the story ends with her mother having her hand on her shoulder. In the next story, some narration says an airbender flew to a mountain in the north, almost losing his paper to give himself some character right away because he was looking for advice from a poet who wrote stuff down and took off like an antisocial. That's it? I didn't even know these people. That's hardly a plot. Now for Lost Pets. Tenten and her kids help serve lunch at a temporary evacuee camp, and Milo doesn't feel like helping. He's called a bunch of synonyms for the same word, as he points out when he's scolded. Korra says she has an idea right beside him, so he should know she wants him to get him to help with this. She lies to him that she trusts him to go with her on a secret deadly assignment. He's offended at being told to find lost pets. He's told that he'd hate it if his own pet was lost, so he agrees. Korra uses the favorite toy of one of the pets as something for her pet to sniff to pick up a scent trail. I don't see how she needs Milo's help with this, and he should know that too. Eventually they find the pet, and Milo has to glide after it in his flying squirrel-like outfit that sure would have been useful for Aang to have. I guess they weren't invented yet. He conveniently finds every missing pet at once because it's a short story. Someone doesn't want to let go of the pets because he grew attached to them after feeding them. It makes sense that someone really old would refuse to evacuate his house. I think I've seen that before. And based on where the vines are, I guess he's lucky his house is as intact as it is. Milo shows him photos of the owners showing affection to their pets. And after some hesitation, he decides to let them go home and hugs one of them. If it was a longer story, it wouldn't have been that easy. Milo says he could follow them to the camp and take a bath there. He gets thanked twice and is happy to be of service. Someone hugs a pet, and Milo gives him some flying lemurs as pets because he knows where 1,000,000 of them are. Then he's told to clean out all of the outhouses and is dragged away as the story ends. I guess this extra unnecessary cruelty was written because most fans find him annoying. And he is a brat with an annoying voice, but he's at least an entertaining brat, unlike his sister Iki. In the next story, in the Earth Kingdom, Asami says she had to make a rough landing with her biplane because of a strong wind out of nowhere, and she's cold. Kora gives her affection and gets it back as a reward because she's miraculously lucky like that. Kora wonders if the wind upset those spirits and made them attack their plane. They swarm their plane and Kora keeps it steady with airbending. Jinora says the strong wind scattered the spirits and they're scared and lost and are blaming the plane. She thinks they need some soothing in the spirit world, and she can't go into it because lately every time she tries to meditate, she starts thinking about the fact that the temple has more airbenders, and while she's trying hard to help, it's never enough. And some people still don't take her seriously. She's insecure about being less skilled at what she's most proud of and gets comforted by the girls in a predictable way for an overly long time. The whole time I'm thinking that the girls are lucky Kora can keep the plane from being pushed off a cliff while talking to her. Jinora astral projects and tells the spirits that they know where to go, even though she had no way of knowing for sure where they needed to go, and she blows and sends them somewhere. That saves the day effortlessly. Well, that was easy. Jinora puts her arms around them and thanks them. I would have enjoyed this more, but I'll always miss her original design. In the next story, which is badly drawn at first despite needing to make a good impression on the first panel the most of all, Kora's introduced to her firebending teacher, who says he won't put up with any foolishness like her other teachers. At least the art gets better. And it's not so bad that's not the show's art style because Kora's a different age. The teacher expects her to spend every day here on the training ground every hour. He's told she's looking forward to the Spirit Festival and is forbidden from talking about it. She isn't doing a good job with keeping focus on firebending because she wants to go to the Spirit Festival. And somehow her teacher doesn't realize that the solution is to give her permission to go there so she'll stop thinking about it. Instead, he tells her to write something. So she sneaks out to the festival to play one game. She wants to play a game, and the person nearby doesn't want her to join in because she doesn't know her. I assume, or why else did she ask her who she is? From desperation, she admits she's the Avatar, and at first she's instantly believed. Then she gets taunted into using firebending. And the fire is put out, but sadly it's not by Kora. And instead her father showed up because he heard she was here. It turns out the firebending teacher came with him, so that means they somehow found out she left even though they had no reason to check on her at all and followed her here. She eventually sees some kids ready to play the game with her because of her parents, instead of her firebending teacher getting character development and humoring her himself from the obvious lesson he had to learn. In clearing the air, Tenzin hears his kids arguing because Iki tore his scroll by accident. He decides to tell them a story about his childhood, and this works as discipline because Iki doesn't like that. Tenzin noticed some smoke because a bender is vandalizing some relics, and he flew after them and caused them to crash into something. He eventually got tied up just like the other kids by metal bending cops that give no explanation as to why they were right here, so I didn't take this seriously. He gets brought to Toph, who thankfully acknowledges that she loves a good fight and explains that they could have gotten hurt. He gets to explain himself, and she tells him that he could have reported to the cops instead. She's not happy to see Aang, who apologizes and offers to pay for the damages. I wish he didn't have facial hair because it makes him look too much like Tenzin usually does instead of feeling like Aang. Toph says nothing was damaged and she's letting off Tenzin with a warning. But the other kids will be spending the night in the slammer. He says he'd rather she let him take the kids back to his island. And she says he's undermining her authority even though he gave a legal excuse for it. One of the kids begs for him to not take away his bending out of nowhere. But it makes logical sense that at least a few benders would have been scared that the Avatar would debend someone other than Ozai, especially since he considered doing it to someone else in a comic. Not to mention they're cynical enough to do graffiti in the first place, so they probably got stressed to work out. Naturally, Tenzin doesn't trust the kids not to do anything else wrong, and he complains in front of Aang for a long time. I love getting to see how he contrasted his father as a kid. Aang says the gates aren't important. Huh? He says Tenzin could never let him down and apologizes to him because he bears the responsibility of being an airbender. It's so nice of him to lie to him that he could never let him down. I mean, the fact that he's serious is already kind of a letdown because he's nothing like him when he was a kid. And I'm sure in all the time he's been alive, he's disappointed him before. Eventually he says that in the Air Nation, when a crime was committed, an elder would call the victim and offender to meet. The victim would explain what he needed in order to heal, and the offender would have the chance to suggest ways to make amends. This could result in the victim asking for too much, but otherwise it sounds pretty nice. I'd rather the victim be the one with the harsh punishment instead of a random judge with no stake in the situation. Then the group was led through a ritual to recirculate the air to purify it. The kids clean the graffiti, but conveniently they seem happy about it for some reason. And the story ends with Milo cleansing the air early and the room being a mess. In the next story, Milo wants to spend more time with Tenzin, but because Lin and the president need his help, he has to leave him on serious business. I have to assume he doesn't trust them to not be a hindrance, because otherwise this is dumb since he's an airbender too. Tenzin thinks it's Bumi's bad influence that made Milo who he is, even though Bumi barely spent any time with him in his childhood. Milo complains to his Uncle Bumi, who relates to him that his father stood him up, so they decide to hang out. It's entertaining that they look forward to getting in danger and leave without emptying the trash cans. It's refreshing that there's someone who loves Bumi's stories instead of everyone hating them. They head for a place and see planes. Their crazy assumption that the island's being taken over by pirates is true. The hammy dialogue of the pirates sounds silly. Bumi got tied up, and Milo catches a shot-out rope and flings himself back at the pirates to send her off the biplane, which could kill her. He puts a hat over someone's head when he's flying the plane, and Milo unhooks Bumi and he falls to the ground, with nothing happening to slow down his fall. It's pure cartoon logic that he isn't injured after that. Then Bumi has a boring talk about Aang. He says Aang had a lot of pressure on him, and when he was a kid, he didn't know that. Milo wants to earn his father's respect to get more time with him, and gets told that everything his father does is to keep him safe. Bumi puts his hand on his shoulder, saying that Tenzin's proud of him, even though he'd only be proud of the fact that he's an airbender, based on his bratty personality. And he says he's proud of him too, even though he spent almost no time with him until recently. Milo says he's proud of him too, which is just as nonsensical, but he is humoring him. And the story's boring and annoying until Bumi makes a plan to hang out anytime his father stands him up. Somehow they see a statue of an airbender that looks silly. So Bumi says the reason Aang kept finding peace here was because he was still playful and fun. This was by Brian Konietzko and Michael D. Martino, and had so many stories that I didn't feel like summarizing them. They're alright. Aside from the one that's barely even a story because it's like 2 pages with characters we don't even know. With the only common problem being that sometimes they're boring. But that's a problem with all of fiction. And being short stories makes the pacing faster than usual. Sometimes the endings even felt rushed because they were so easy. Like the Puffball Spirits, where I don't know how Jinora knew how to resolve the plot without knowing where they were supposed to go. Other than that though, I feel like the stories made sense.